Well, first of all, it is great to see everybody. What I'm going to do is just talk a little bit about my organization, the Development and Business Center, and really focus on kind of what we have been focused on in the organization in terms of organizational priorities as well as the director's priorities. And then I'm going to hand off the reins to the two development houses that actually do most of the contracting within the organization. I am going to talk a little bit about, just quickly, on NBIS. Like Mr. Montemurro did say, that we are going with a small, one piece of the NBIS acquisition is going to be, for case management, it's going to go through OTA. It's going to go through the C5 consortium. And we did get some great comments back from industry regarding our RFI that was pushed out a couple of months ago. And we anticipate notification of the release of the way forward for the consortium any day now. So for those of you guys who have provided comments, thank you very much. We look forward to that initiative. Let's go to the next slide, please. You know, it's funny because I can't even see this thing down here. So I'm going to have to do it from scratch. So this is my organization. Just for those of you who are not familiar with the organization, and you know, Mr. Montemurro talked about the left side and the right side. I am the left side of the organization. So what that means is, if you think about it from a life cycle management perspective, is I have that front end requirements process, that front end engagement process, so mission partner engagement and the outreach piece of that. So we're the folks that work with our mission partners to understand what those requirements are and what is actually the need statements that come in from our mission partners, so that we can just in turn decide whether or not DISA will in turn make that a capability that we'll provide. So as you see, we have mission partner engagement, our requirements analysis office. Those are the arms, the conduits to our mission partners in both facets, one from a customer engagement and one from a requirements process. And then Cindy Yor, who you heard her name today, she is strategic communications. So the work we're doing here and having this event, as well as our symposiums, as well as everything you see on our social media channels, as well as our symposium itself, all that's done out of the strategic communications office. And then we have a small group called the Information Systems Innovation and System Engineering Directorate, and that actually is a combination of what was essentially the old engineering group that did enterprise architectures and standards, but it's also been collapsed with the CTO organization, if you recall Mr. Mihalchik's team. So we've collapsed those two organizations to focus on new capabilities, new innovations, as well as still doing enterprise architecture and standards for some of our mission partners. But the brunt of the work that you guys care about is, of course, under cyber development and services development. And here today we have Colonel Brian Lytle, who is the PEO for cyber, and he'll talk about some of the initiatives, as you can see below, some of the capabilities that he has that he'll be talking about. And then Mr. Carpenter, who owns the business side, all our business services, command and control, all what we're doing in terms of some of the initiatives regarding collaboration and all that, and services. He'll talk a little bit about that. And then finally, Jake Marsalis, who is the PM for mobility, will talk about some of the new initiatives that the boss talked about today regarding where we're going tomorrow with mobility. So I do want to talk a little bit about the development center itself, if we can go to the next slide. And I kind of broke it into like 5 different channels, and I kind of highlighted some areas that we really focus on quite a bit, or where I consider the priorities of DBC, and of course they do align with what the director is trying to do as part of moving forward. And if you think about enterprise services, and you've heard this for the past year, 18 months, is we want to go to reducing the complexity for that end user. And so some of the big initiatives we have, of course, is DIOS, and Mr. Carpenter will talk a little bit about where we're going with DIOS. And then, of course, expanding and exploiting cloud. DISA's position has always been, and it will continue to be, that we're not only supporting just our cloud services on-prem, but we also support those mission partners who wish to consider using off-prem solutions. But how do we ensure that there's a security boundary and the security that's in place so they can use those off-prem solutions? So we work very hard on putting some of those capabilities in place right now, so that when a customer does go and decide to use an Azure capability off-prem, we have those security boundaries in place for not only ensuring that our end users have access to those systems securely, but that we have no unintentional effects of having that data outside the DoDIN. So we are exploiting some of the solutions with our security architecture, and we're moving forward with those. And then expanding mobility solutions. Like I said, Jake's going to talk about going beyond where we are with our unclassified and classified solutions to some of our bigger efforts with top secret, as well as some of our tablet efforts. On cybersecurity, like I mentioned, Brian's going to talk about a lot of initiatives we're doing in terms of building that three-tiered security framework from the perimeter all the way down to the endpoint and everything in between, and how do we make sure that we have the tools, the processes, and the expertise to support the protection of the DoDIN. And he'll talk about how do we build that defendable network. On C2, Mr. Carpenter is going to talk about where we're taking what was essentially old legacy client-server architecture, where we push solutions out to the combatant commanders and had them build it on their own suite of hardware, to putting it into the cloud, putting it into the enterprise, and how do you manage an enterprise command and control system. And he'll talk about some of the initiatives we're doing with that from a contract perspective, and that's and moving away from there. On business systems, DISA is doing a lot in terms of business systems. Obviously, we have our own business processes that we got to optimize. We've got a lot of legacy and I will say channels within our own business processes that we need to fix. We need to move towards some kind of an enterprise resource planning type solution that encompasses not only just the finances, but the logistics and the business processes. How we take provisioning and how do we optimize provisioning end to end, from the minute the customer orders a capability all the way till it's automated, it's provisioned in an automatic fashion. So Terry's working really hard on taking that next step with that, as well as CRM, customer relationship management. We should be paramount in how do we understand what our customers' needs are and understanding the demand signal. And so working those capabilities to do that is one of the things we're working hard on. And finally, IT testing, and with JITC. Under JITC, we've obviously just rewarded an enterprise testing contract, but we're also changing the way we're going to be using JITC too. From what was essentially an operational test and interoperability testing organization, which I would call the back-end validation and verification piece, to something that we're bringing them up front in the development process. So having JITC come in as part of development, as part of the innovation process, as part of everything up front in the whole life cycle. So changing the way they think about things. So a lot of things we're trying to do in that area. Let's go to the next slide. We've talked a little bit about this, so I'm not going to jump in. I'm not going to repeat a lot of the things, but I will say a couple of them that are important that we didn't mention earlier. The boss talked about software-defined networking. You'll hear some of the things we're doing in terms of how do we build provisioning or automation into not only the wide area network with respect to provisioning, but at the data center level, how do we build automation so that we seamlessly migrate capability and not have any downtime across the ecosystem. From a next generation identity, the boss talked about where we're going with doing multiple factor identification, continuous authentication capabilities, and you'll hear a little bit about that today. I did say on the sandbox capabilities, the lab sandbox, we're actually building a DoDIN lab in our JITC centers so that our mission partners who actually go to you guys for development will bring that capability in our JITC lab and do that development on a simulated DoDIN environment. So that's one thing that we're trying to do right now too. And then, of course, exploiting the gray network strategy, a gray network strategy, where we're looking at new technologies, commercial solutions for classified, as a way of getting away from, GOTS-based Type 1 accreditation and moving toward commercial solutions. So a lot of areas that we're focused on as part of Development and Business Center in terms of taking us to tomorrow, and so we look forward to working with you guys on that. I have 3 contracts that I want to talk about real quick at the enterprise level, and then I'm going to hand it off to our seniors. If we go to the next slide. Enterprise communications and collaboration. This is a small engineering contract that we're going to still have under ISED, which is really going to be focused on tactical data links and enterprise architecture. It's a continuation of what we're doing now in the contract that we currently exist. It is going to be another RFQ that's going to go out in the first quarter. I'll tell you right now that it's going to be a 1 year, one option year, but the intent is that that's going to roll into SETI. So that contract and that capability will roll into the SETI initiative based on timing and all the stuff. GenTACS, the Joint Interoperability and Tactical Command Systems Integration and MDA Research and Development. That again is a support as part of our support to supporting the PMO GenTACS. We provide engineering support for messaging, tactical messaging platforms for our combatant commanders. It will be also a single award with an RFQ going out on second quarter with a projected award at the end of the fiscal year. And finally, this is the follow-on to our fiscal JLA. Again, that's going to be just another DoD-wide SmartNet support to support both hardware and maintenance support for all the Cisco environments across the Department of Defense. It will be a brand name, but RFQ will be going out first quarter of next year. So that's all I have. If pending any questions and handing off to some of the seniors. Again, this is my last Forecast Industries 2. It's been a pleasure working with all of you guys. I know a lot of you guys are my friends and colleagues, and so with that, I'm out of airspeed and altitude.
Mr. Rivera, we do have one question.
Okay.
What is DISA's appetite for using newer emerging technologies and methods for tackling the volume, velocity, and variety needs of data analytics across DoD? And can you give examples of technologies currently in use and how they're being used?
I'm sorry, say that one more time. I'm sorry, I didn't hear the first part.
What is DISA's appetite for using newer emerging technologies and methods for tackling the volume, velocity, and variety of needs of data analytics across DoD?
That's a very good question. I think, the 3 V's, I think that this has got a great big appetite. We are actually looking at different ways of how do we support data analytics from a perspective of newer capabilities, newer technologies, and going beyond just what we're doing right now in some of the innovative ways we're doing with big data, but looking at not only how do we support cyber, but how do we support even business processes and other decision support tools. So we are very open to different technologies and capabilities that support big data analytics and decision support. So I think we're very supportive of that across the DISA environment.